Well, 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 it is hard to track this man down, but we finally got him. I believe he is in Istanbul. I'm in Spain. So, Craig, after all the traveling that you've been doing, how is life? I know you were just in Ukraine, so a lot of mental warfare going on there.
Yeah. Oh, we'll probably leave that. But yeah, obviously exhausted. Being in Ukraine definitely takes its toll on you. We're getting bombed all the time. We had some near misses, a lot of air alerts and stuff. But the European seminar tour was raised to raise money to give to my friend Roman. Roman's one of us, Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He wasn't living in Ukraine for 8 years before the full-scale invasion started, and he left a happy life in France, running a pizza shop, training jiu-jitsu every day to go back and protect the homeland. So, I went to Ukraine for the first time last year, and I did a charity seminar there, and he had commented on my charity seminar post, basically being like, "Yo, so many of the soldiers train we can't get to Kyiv. We can't get to Kyiv whenever we want. What about the boys on the front line?" And I was like, "Well, I'll come see you on the front line." And then we just sort of created this sort of strong friendship, and I felt like quite an attachment to the Ukrainian people. Politics aside, I know it's a very political subject in America, but it's just once you meet people like that in those circumstances, struggling, and they are struggling, it's like I felt like I owed it to them to go back and help. I mean, obviously, it's costing so much money, that war, but if I can contribute and help out my boys in any way, so that was the goal of the European seminar tour, was to raise money personally. I don't want to be one of those people that just tells people, "Oh, donate," but they actually don't do anything themselves. It's kind of the reason we're involved with the Guardian project too. It's one thing to tell people to donate money to cause it, another thing to actually donate your own money, your time. So that's kind of what my mission has been. Obviously, we're helping friends, but helping anyone we can with this platform.
On the European seminar tour, it looked like you were teaching a lot of people some Octopus guard, but Roman showed you a different strategy on how to defend that buggy choke. So are you guys going to be teaching that as well?
Was that the second? That might have been the second trip to Ukraine. So I've basically I've been to a lot of Ukraine. I would say Kherson was crazy. That particular one was done in a village that was occupied by Russians, and Ukraine took it back, and it's been completely destroyed. And when we filmed that video of the buggy choke defense, we were being bombed, and there were drones overhead as we speak. So we had to quickly get out, film a funny video. But that's what we'll do in the name of content, right? And that's something else I think people need to remember about this whole Ukrainian war experience, right? Is that even the soldiers on the front line, they're trying to find any opportunity to have fun. So when people say, "Why are you there?" It's well, I'm coming over there trying to bring some positive energy, being the idiot I am. Everyone needs an escape. Obviously, Kyiv got bombed very badly the night before I arrived, which was, I think, sadly 14 or 28 people died. It's been getting hit quite heavy right now. So even the people in Kyiv, they're living their lives. They're trying to go about their day. A lot of people be like, "How are they at war?" Look at these people having a good time. Of course, no matter the circumstances you're in, you're going to try and find a way to have a good time. It doesn't mean that when you're in a quiet place alone, or when the bombs are hitting, you're not in absolute anguish and emotional turmoil. I'm obviously risking my life to be over there, but again, when you meet people living in bad circumstances, especially the men of Ukraine, they can't leave Ukraine, and they are getting conscripted to go to battle. So for me to go visit the country, if I'm not going to go to the front lines with the boys putting their life on the line, I feel like it's sort of disingenuous, and it looks like I'm just over there chasing clout. But I've been to Kharkiv, Kherson, Kramatorsk. I went within Kherson maybe a river's length, the Dnipro River. That was the distance I was from Russian soldiers. So it's again, some people might look at it look like clout chasing, but at the end of the day, I'm just there to help my buddy out. And he's been fighting for 3 years. He didn't have to go back to Ukraine. He was already out of Ukraine. He enlisted to help his family. His mum still lives over there. So it's they're trying to protect their land, and obviously, what I can contribute is minuscule in comparison to what foreign governments can. But at the same time, you got to help your friends out wherever you can. So the European Seminar Tour was raising money. I gave all that money. Well, I gave it as much as I could to my buddy Roman, and that's going to help his battalion with whatever they need. That doesn't necessarily mean buying drones and weapons and stuff. Like, that's whatever they need. They, typically speaking, one of the biggest expenses that isn't covered for them is their car. And you can imagine, like, they have to drive on roads that have been destroyed, so they're hitting potholes, destroying their car constantly. So car repairs for even a battalion is a huge thing for them, because it allows them to escape. That's the vehicle they take to escape the front line for their downtime, you know? So, like, if they don't have a car, they can't really leave the military bases. So even car repairs go a long way to keep the spirit up of these guys. And obviously I want to talk about it, but yeah, definitely some of the stories of what these guys have had to go through it's pretty horrific. So it's been a rough 2 weeks. Not a lot of sleep. I got sick out there too, unfortunately, but yeah, we were getting bombed every night in Kharkiv. I remember one of the nights I thought there was a mosquito in the room, but it was a Shahid drone flying overhead, and I looked out the window and they were trying to shoot it down and stuff. Yeah, so it's all around pretty heavy experience, but ultimately I'm there for my boy. I'm there to support any way I can. But yeah, for me to do a seminar run like that, like I love seminars. I love meeting jiu-jitsu people, but it's an overwhelming experience, like in terms of energy draining. And it's probably bad timing to do this trip given the CJI preparation. And I'm trying to make phone calls to Seth at the same time, different time zones and stuff. And obviously sometimes we're hiding out in bunkers. The cell service is not very good. But we're now in Istanbul before we begin the USA road trip. I just needed some downtime, some mental before we go ahead into CJI.
Yeah, no, the video of Roman crying when he heard that you were going to come and everything that you did with him was so heavy. We're so happy that you're safe. You're in Istanbul now, reunited with Aaron, the best videographer in the world. And there's going to be more Road to CJIs coming. So we're super excited for that. Obviously, when you've been out and about, there has been so much news in the jiu-jitsu world, but a lot of positive things. We had AIGA, UFC BJJ during International Fight Week, and just a lot of news around the jiu-jitsu world. And I think a lot of people might have a misconception about what your perception is of all these different opportunities happening in the jiu-jitsu world. So I guess let's talk about UFC BJJ first, because that was the one that a lot of people were feeling like, oh, Craig is bitter about this. But I think from your perspective, it was awesome to see a lot of familiar faces that were also on CJI, the rule set, the setting that they had being used and having success with it. So what was your overall perception of UFC BJJ and the finale that happened live and free on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm going to have an emotional response when somebody copies you without credit. There's going to be an emotional response. That's my own personal feelings, given I credited the 10-point must system. I credited the pit. It was kind of me combining everything I'd seen work in jiu-jitsu in isolation and putting them together to come up with what I believe was the most exciting rule set for jiu-jitsu. So obviously I'm going to be emotional when the UFC does copy it without crediting some inspiration. You know, that's going to bother me. But really, ultimately, like, I didn't get in the promoting game, the promoting business, to be a promoter. Like, I don't think people realize how much work goes into that and how it is ultimately rewarding if everything goes well, but there is a lot of pressure on you. I got into it to get athletes compensated. So I'm wholeheartedly not invested in this promoting business. I was just wanting to get athletes paid. So if the UFC comes in, copies what I did, and adequately compensates athletes, awesome. That's great. That's great. Like, if the boys are getting paid, if the athletes are getting paid, that's sick. If they ultimately do become a monopoly like they are in MMA, but the guys are getting paid and they're happy, they're getting the exposure, they're getting everything they want, that's incredible. I think that is a bit, the UFC might have started these exclusive contracts a bit too late in the game, because unfortunately, like, Dana would always talk about boxing, and why boxing's broken is because, like, this promoter owns these athletes and they don't fight. And that's kind of what I'm really a bit worried about now, is, like, I loved that the ADCC provided an opportunity where guys that are already signed to events like One and Flow could meet, and they'd meet every 2 years. CGI were trying to do that once a year to put on some crazy, exciting, free event, of which any profits we make goes towards building jiu-jitsu schools for impoverished kids around the world. So, like, for me personally, I was happy really to see the exposure these guys got. Like, obviously, some of the views and some of the comments were a bit suspicious, but yeah, for me, if the UFC take the reins, go nuts, enjoy it. It's great for the sport. If CJI served its purpose to create a great, exciting rule set to grow the sport, and someone else wants to come in and take the reins and pay those guys, by all means, go for it. But like, what concerns me now is the greatest match jiu-jitsu history: Andrew Tackett versus Cade Rotolo. Cade Rotolo signed to one championship, despite Techi taking a cheeky fan photo and implying that Cade could do UFC BJJ 2 against Andrew Tackett. Despite him doing that, that's disingenuous because Cade is signed to one in UFC are rivals. So now Andrew and Cade Part 2 cannot happen unless one of those guys signs to the other organization. But obviously, if each of them are happy in their current organization, we are robbed of that match. Like, I always think about the dream tournament. Mika Galvao signed to Flo, Joseph Chen's a free agent. Like, Cade, Andrew, Joseph, and Mika Galvao would be the ultimate four-man tournament. I think almost the pound for pound. It would decide the pound for pound best grappler right now. So, like, my stress is that the UFC currently for MMA is where the best fight the best. Had the UFC invested in the sport of jiu-jitsu and signed a bunch of athletes a long time ago to these exclusive deals, then UFC BJJ would have the best fight in the best. But unfortunately, one kind of started this in terms of exclusive deals and really mixing MMA with the grappling events. Flow Grappling have always ran their WNOs or broadcasted other events for a long time. So I just think we're at a crucial moment in the sport where, although we have these events that are going to get mass eyes on them, we might not have the best fight in the best. We might have mismatches, and CJI or even ADCC is a great opportunity for guys signed to these events to be able to compete. One always had a clause where guys could do IBJJF for ADCC. I worked incredibly hard to make it so that one would allow their athletes to do CJI. Shatri, props to you. Props to Tom DeBlas, who you just had on. As it stands, Flo and One are happy for their athlete to do CJI. We're not a competitor. We're one event per year. It's free on YouTube. We're giving the money to charity. We're trying to grow the sport in every sense of the word, from the third world up until the most professional level athletes. So, like, the UFC really rubbed me the wrong way because I don't think we're going to have any UFC athletes participate in our event. And again, obviously there's an emotional response there, but yeah, if they do take the reins, they do a good job and they pay everyone, power to them, That's great. That was our goal to begin with.
Okay, there was a lot to unpack there. I want to start off with part of the comment that people, it might go over their head. You're like, there is some suspicious comments and different things on their UFC BJJ. Let's just focus on the finale. I think what you're talking about is all of the bot comments. So that's kind of showing that they might have paid for views or comments. My question is, why would they feel so pressured that they have to buy views and comments? Like, do you think it was one of those things where they were feeling pressure from people above them saying, oh, if it doesn't hit this number, we're going to have to rethink this whole entire UFC BJJ thing? Because if they broadcasted it on the UFC platform, UFC Embedded with Sugar Sean O'Malley got around 736K views. And all the comments are authentic MMA fans commenting on Sugar Sean. But UFC BJJ, 1.2 million, and half of the comments are, thank you so much for this post. It was, thank you for explaining this to me. And there's just a bunch of different fake bot comments. So what do you think was the incentive for them to buy views and likes? Like, don't you think that it would have performed well without all of that, considering the cast was really good, it was a really fun action? Like, they didn't really have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, and this was pure speculation, right? There could have been 1,000 people write the same comment. We don't know for sure from a liability perspective whether they did or not. That's if they were to have done that, that's one aspect that bothers me too, because, like, as an athlete myself, I'm always looking for leverage in negotiations. We want to know what our true value is. So CJI, we didn't buy any views. We didn't buy any comments. It's a great, you can do that. You can do that in a sneaky way. That helps you secure sponsors, for your event, right? It's going to make you personally more money. But like what I really wanted to do was show how many people watch these events, right? Because again, like it's not in Flow Grappling's interest. It's not in Fight Pass' best interest. It's not in any broadcaster's best interest when something's behind a paywall for you to tell whatever you're hosting how many views they get, because that brings a lot of leverage to the negotiation table for the other party, right? So, like, part of me showcasing the true views of what grappling can do was to put the power in the athlete's hands so they can walk over. Like, I remember Fionn Davies versus Mackenzie Dern was a huge peak. You can look at the stream and you can see the peaks and valleys, and that's great for the athlete to negotiate contracts for themselves. And Fionn, I'm sure, got compensated quite well. And part of that, I imagine, like as a promoter myself, like I would have looked at what Fionn Mackenzie Dern did and been like, wow, Fionn's a huge draw, which I mean, personally, I already know she is, which is why we wanted her in the show. She's also a good voice in the sport. But if people were to inflate views or inflate comments, then it kind of does take a bit of the power away from the athlete, because then the promoter's going to be like, he's not going to take into account. Like if you as an athlete go, well, look how many numbers we did, and those numbers aren't entirely accurate. I also feel bad if like if sometimes you see these comment chains and you're like, obviously that's not real. And then the athletes are like, oh, we did 1 million views, and they're posting it on socials. Like, obviously it feels really good for them. But if you were to have that bubble burst and realize that it's not entirely accurate, then that would hit a sore spot.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it was done to be able to like make that graphic online so that the public perception is like, oh, it really hit great numbers. And then another part of me is like, okay, a big part of their negotiation scheme is to talk about the exposure. And so I just feel like it's good to be honest with the athletes about what your actual viewership is in the comments, so that they don't try to use that in like a negotiation perspective of like, hey, we're going to get you all this exposure. But very interesting. If you guys want to check it out yourself, just go to UFC BJJ, the finale, and you can kind of look through the comments yourself. But another thing that you brought up is one of the stories that you put up, basically about the dream bracket that you would get: Joseph Chen, Mika Galvao, Andrew Tackett, Cade Rotolo, and how we can't get that. But then you also followed up in one of your stories, UFC offered me 6 figures to coach and compete against Mikey, but would have been fully exclusive. This sport is now entering an era where athletes won't be able to compete in CJI or ADCC. And one final annoyance, until I formally declined coaching UFC BJJ show, their athletes could compete in CJI. So I think that last part is the interesting part, that this war wasn't really started until you as a professional said, this contract isn't good for me. And now you're trying to walk away from that. And now there's all of a sudden some conflict.
We've been talking to the UFC for a long time, and no NDAs were signed, nothing was signed. You know what I mean? Like, they're a smart group of people. Hunter Campbell, obviously, I think he really is the brains behind the UFC these days. Like, and he's a very smart, shrewd businessman and lawyer. So like most of these conversations, they're just phone call conversations, right? But like really, like what we're trying to establish early is the CJI an enemy or a friend of the UFC? If we're a friend of the UFC, that we're going to be able to kind of work together on these things. But yeah, they did want me to be, as far as I know, pure speculation here, but speculation was that it was going to be Gordon and Mikey. But Gordon is pursuing politics and doesn't want to compete anymore. Also, like those health battles could be legitimate. Who knows? I don't know. He's also opened Kingsway, so like we've got another powerhouse gym in Austin, right? So he's busy and he didn't want to compete against Mikey Musumeci. Like, is he scared of Mikey? No. Like, obviously Gordon's probably the best ever. Mikey's incredibly talented. There's also a massive size discrepancy there. So the second choice was they came to call me to jump on board, and they offered, I won't say the number, they offered a decent amount of money to do it, but really, like, in terms of the commitment, obviously it was a week of filming, and then I'd have to cut my plans to help my buddy in Ukraine. So there were a few factors going into why I wouldn't do it, but it will also be quite a restrictive contract. And I love the power of being a free agent. Not everyone has that power where they can market themselves. They do rely on the organization to market them. I mean, honestly, that's kind of why we started the B Team YouTube channel to begin with. We wanted to be able to market ourselves without reliance on organizations. So yeah, we had conversations where there was nothing in writing, nothing official, but for a long period of time, their athletes were able to do CJI. But when I did formally decline the offer, I asked for too much money, apparently, right? They went with Harrison Gabriel. And props to him. That's a great opportunity for him to get in there. And I did watch his match with Mike. He did do quite well defensively. That was a big jump for a man that hasn't had much nogi experience. But yeah, they afterwards, they really did block their athletes from doing our event. And one factor was that after I formally declined the offer, when they were discussing with athletes, which they left really to the last minute, some of the athletes on the show knew for 3 months, some of them knew for 3-4 days. So any athlete that they spoke with that said they were participating in CJI, they weren't put on the show. You basically had to make a choice. And also, I won't say who, but I did sneak a peek at some of the text message conversations between the producers of the show and the athletes themselves. And yeah, if you were to participate in the show, it would be, you could not do CJI. And again, I do understand that if you're investing in an athlete and you're marketing an athlete, it is a liability for you to now allow that athlete to go compete for another event and risk losing to someone from another organization or risk getting injured. And again, that's why I give props to Shatri and Tom DeBlas, because if we look at it, Cade Rotolo won the million. Ty Rotolo competed, got injured. He had a serious knee injury. But that did not scare them out of allowing their athletes to compete again. It's an athlete-first mentality. I think this year I wanted to – basically, we did the teams event, right? Because for me personally, Quintet's the most exciting grappling event that's ever existed. It's the most fun. It's the most exciting. You see all these wild matchups. People aren't scared to lose because – like Polaris on the weekend, Helena won 3 in a row and then lost or potentially lost. I think she lost one match too, but she's already been out there banging away at multiple matches. So I wanted to showcase another exciting format in terms of leverage for getting athletes involved in our event. The appeal of $1 million individually versus 1 million shared amongst the team is not as strong here. But I knew after CJI won, a lot of people would copy our format. UFC obviously copied the format, but I wanted to mix it up and showcase another side of grappling, which was this team format. So really CGI 2, the plan was always to do something different. We already proved that was the best. People are copying it. Great. That's kind of becoming the unified rule set for Jiu-Jitsu, which is something that a lot of people criticized that we lacked, was that every organization had different rules. But yeah, this year we're going to showcase how exciting the teams format is. There's no greater spectacle than when you see a Fabricio Andre face potentially a Nicky Rod. So I love that we are mixing it up this year. I will say though, with the UFC seeing CGI 1 and doubling down on copying it and really pushing into the sport, it is a bit of a hindrance because we do lose people like the Tackett brothers, but it is what it is. As long as those boys are getting paid, power to them.
Yeah, and you brought up how important it is to push the fact that team events are really exciting as well. We just had Aiga and Polaris squads this past weekend, and they both delivered. Let's talk about Aiga a little bit. You brought up the Tacketts. Both of them were originally on Team Kasai, who ended up going home with that $500,000 first place grand prize. So if you were in their shoes, what would you rather have experienced? Doing capoeira in the UFC Bowl or getting your share of $500K? Because they definitely would have also won if Andrew Tackett was on that roster.
Yeah, I mean, to have the Tackett brothers in your team in that AIGA event, the Tackett brothers were involved in the 2 previous AIGA, the qualifying events for the teams. Obviously the teams shuffled around a bit.
They earned their spot, yeah.
But they had to basically sit out on the finale and the grand prize. Who knows? I imagine Richard Byrne, who runs up Kasai, probably compensated them a portion of that prize either way. But yeah, definitely probably not as much of the split of that 500K if they had participated in that event. So that's kind of like the crux of my problem here. A lot of people think it's just me being bitter and me not being the face of everything. And it's really is that I just don't want athletes to miss out on opportunities in this sport. And that's really what's at stake here when someone has an exclusive contract and the promoter isn't willing to allow them to participate in these events, especially events like they were in the team for the first two and they missed out on the finale and the grand prize. And yeah, I watched all 3 or 4 of their events, whatever. And then my Kazakhstan boys that I've spent a lot of time with and stuff, that was a phenomenal event. Props to Tooligan. The finale delivered beyond belief. I will say that I was a bit skeptical of how good the finale would be because I think some of the qualifying events weren't maybe as exciting, but the finale really delivered. And that's a testament also to when there's a lot on the line, a lot of money, people will fight hard. The only thing I could say is would have been more exciting in the pit. There are a few resets, you know?
Yeah, the dual format definitely makes it last so long. So I'm kind of excited to see how the quintet will do. Like, I feel like it won't be nearly as long of a day. I do want to, before we wrap up on the UFC BJJ stuff, there was a post from the former Karate Combat president, Adam Kovac, and he basically said the UFC does not want to promote fights anymore. They want to own the entire fight ecosystem. And when I spoke to some of the fighters that are involved in CJI, like Marcin Machulovitz and Luke Griffith, who is going to be on this episode, we're going to be talking to him next. Marcin basically said he chose CJI because it feels good to be on the right side of history. And when I asked Luke about what the potential of exclusive contracts could do to the sport, he said it could be potentially detrimental. So for you, what is it like being able to see some of these big name athletes choose CJI because they think it is what is best for the sport?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously heartwarming and it's also a lot of faith in me. Also a lot of stress and pressure, you know what I mean? Like, I felt the same pressure for the last one. Guys chose the chance at $1 million, an event that it hadn't been proven, an event that could have failed, the money could have fucking vanished. They chose to support that over ADCC. So yeah, like, I mean, this is kind of a really crucial spot in the sport where a lot of athletes need to understand we have sort of a call to arms. We're going to be more powerful together. And this will sound like some tacky speech, but really, like, we're at a moment where an absolute powerhouse of an organization has decided that now's the time to enter the sport and own it. And then we have power in numbers. And I'm never going to judge personally, even though it might look like that. There's a means to an end. I'm not going to judge personally if you're already like a big name and you get offered big money. Like, if you take it, like, I get it. You got to like take care of yourself here, right? But as the athletes out there that aren't you, like me turning down any sort of exclusive deals, right? Like, I am not just thinking about me. I am thinking about others here, right? So like, if you want to be the best grappler in the sport and someone like the UFC offers you crazy money, just remember that your opponents aren't necessarily going to get paid very much to face you here. And there's a lot of people, we don't do it for the money, but like, we've got to think of each other here because we've all been broke in this sport. Most of the people in the sport are still broke. But like, if we stand strong here together, and the UFC or similar organizations try to lock people into exclusive contracts, if we stand strong together, they'll be forced to give us opportunities to compete in other things that make us money, right? So like, if you do sign it, that's fine. Like, I won't have any judgment. But yeah, I do think you'll be on the wrong side of history. If we do look back at this moment in 5 years and we lost and we have grappling controlled by one organization, you have no leverage to negotiate. I mean, if we look at like Francis Ngannou's story and how strongly he was pushed in terms of re-signing a new contract and the difficulties there and him wanting to be paid and how ultimately he got out, he made his bag in boxing and he worked at PFL and stuff. It's like, we don't want to be in a position where you're the face of a sport and you're struggling still to make money. There's no incentive for a monopoly to pay athletes more money. your only choice will be fight or retire. And you can use the leverage of a retirement to try to get more money and boost your contract. But really, like, you have no leverage to say, well, these guys offer me this much. If you want me, pay me this much. Like, I just think there's a lot of smart people in the sport that understand that. There's some people that just have been broke their whole lives, and that's going to be too appealing to them. And again, no judgment on that. Like, you got to make enough money to live. You got to take care of your family. But it is what it is. I do think I'm trying to be on the right side of history here. Like, again, and I want to emphasize this, I don't care if I don't promote. This shit takes years off my life. It is so hard to organize these events. Like, the stress it puts me and Seth under to try and make sure everything's perfect is insane. So, like, I mean, ultimately, if the athletes are paid and someone else is running it, like, I don't care. Like, that, it'd almost be a relief. It'd be something off my chest to do things, the more fun things I want to do in my life. Like, CJI is about athlete compensation first and putting power back in the hands of the athletes. I'm providing you an alternative to exclusive contracts. I'm providing you the information of how many people view it, and you can use that to leverage sponsorships. Like, again, there's not much in it for me. There's not much in it for me to do this event. I'm just trying to help out other people, because when I was coming up, I would have to pay my own way, compete for free. I'd have to do all these things. Like, I would say that prior to sort of Gordon, the Death Squad, and me coming up, professional grappling didn't exist. Your only career path was to open a school one day, get enough accomplishments, and then open a school. But these days, we do have real alternatives here where you could sign with Flow, you could sign with One, you could sign with the UFC, and we don't necessarily want any of them to have a stranglehold on the sport unless those contracts allow room for you to compete for other one-off big events, because then you have the power to make real money elsewhere. You also have the power to shop contracts. And again, while now people are signed to exclusive deals, if the UFC's budget's this much, and to get an Andrew Tackett, it chews up the whole thing, then that means there's no room for a Mika Galvao on the UFC's budget. There's no room for a Kay Ritol on the UFC's budget. So, like, as fans, first and foremost, enjoy the UFC BJJ. It's a great show. Enjoy the finale. It was great. Watch their events, by all means. I know they're exciting because I made the rules. But understand that there is a lot at stake here. If you want to see the best fight the best, we need these athletes to hold the line at the negotiating table. And a lot of the times these people treat us like idiots, and they think we're just going to go hook, line, and sinker into, we're going to show your face at a UFC broadcast. We're going to do a whatever, expo, photo signings. Ultimately that shit's meaningless. That's work. That's you working for them and them helping you. Like, it's a partnership here. But if you really want true power, you need to be able to hold the line on the exclusive part of the contracts.
Well, we do know being a promoter can sometimes be a thankless job, but from me and everyone else with a brain in the jiu-jitsu community, we appreciate you and we want you promoting for as long as you can physically make it. I do remember the time when...
Shout out to America.
Yeah, we might lose Craig here, but CJI versus ADCC did so much for the sport. It got fighters show money and more opportunity for everyone around. But I'm curious, what do you think the odds are that UFC and Craig Jones get on good terms again? Because we know that you're on good terms with Mo, despite all the things, blowing up an ADCC car and doing all these crazy things to kind of get this drama and storyline to build up what the inaugural CJI was. So do you think it's going to be a similar situation? Do you think there's kind of going back after the joke of blowing up a Dana White sex doll, or do you think there's no going back from here?
I mean, historically, I'd say like UFC are pretty strong in how they handle people, and they do take things very serious, right? But like, ultimately, first and foremost, they're a very successful business. You know what I mean? They created the MMA ecosystem. So first and foremost, business comes first for them. You know what I mean? Like, I think really smart people put aside personal differences to get to the heart of making money for themselves. But we need an opportunity where we can work together, because the growth of the sport is good for UFC BJJ. UFC BJJ is good for CJI to a degree. If the UFC are bringing eyes to grappling, those eyes are probably going to watch CJI. If they can bring new eyes just because of UFC branding, then those people are going to be interested in the sport and ultimately hopefully watch or buy tickets to CJI. So I think there is a common middle ground that benefits us all. And that's really what I wanted with the UFC to begin with, is that more power to you. Obviously it'd be great if you could credit it and not on broadcast say, don't say the P word. You know what I mean? It'd be great if you could give some credit where credit's due. Again, I understand it from a business perspective. You're boosting other people up that are below you. That's the way you see it. But if we do one event a year, one single event a year, people might consider it the Super Bowl or the biggest event of the year. If the UFC BJJ athletes can go in there and get paid and they can bring eyes to themselves, it's another storyline for their career that the UFC can paint a picture with. So I think ultimately, what's good for the athletes is good for the promoter and the sport as a whole. Without CJI, we wouldn't have had Cade Rotolo versus Andrew Tackett. With exclusive contracts, we won't have that again. And again, for me, even if I sit back on the sidelines as a fan, I'm not involved at all in the promoting business or the event business or even training or competing, I'll still enjoy watching grappling. And that's what I want to see at the end of the day, is matches like that, which have done more for the sport than any single promotion ever has. So obviously, still a big shout out and thank you to Andrew Tackett and Cade Rotolo for giving us that match. I just love the opportunity to see more matches like that.
And although you and Gordon Ryan are mortal enemies, I think he would also agree with you that exclusive contracts are not the move for Jiu-Jitsu athletes at this time. So before we get on to other news, like the next athlete being added to the 100K women's bracket and some other news regarding teams, let's throw it to an interview with Luke Griffith and Big Dan coming up.